The megalithic busts found on Easter Island have become synonymous with mystery and antiquity. They represent not only an episode of history that has mostly been forgotten, but also a prime example of how a society ultimately failed due to exhausting its valuable resources. Easter Island's history begins around 800 to 1200 CE, when Polynesian sailors began reaching the remote volcanic body in the Pacific Ocean. The soon-to-be inhabitants of Easter Island spoke a Polynesian language called Rapua Nui. The inhabitants of the island flourished for around 400 years until the 18th century, when a massive and mysterious economic collapse took place. By the time of the European arrival in 1722, the population of Easter Island had dwindled to only a few thousand, and the tree growth had vastly disappeared. Over the next 150 years, the population of Easter Island would undergo tragic declines, until around 1966, when the Rapua Nui people were granted citizenship from Chile. Today, the island and its megalithic structures attract thousands of tourists each year. Yet, the true story of the island remains one of great ambiguity and controversy. To understand the controversy of Easter Island's history, we need to examine the various claims about the island and the complex history of its people. The megalithic statues on Easter Island are called the moai. The moai were erected by the Rapua Nui people for a number of reasons. One such reason was to protect the inhabitants of the island, as the statues themselves were believed to possess the spirits of deceased ancestors. This is why most of the statues face away from the sea, as if to keep their eyes on the descendants. Only 7 of the statues are facing toward the sea, which may have symbolized the ancestors keeping watch over the Rapua Nui sailors away at sea during voyages. The mysterious Easter Island heads are the root of great controversy due to their current dilapidated state on the island's mountains. Many have speculated that the moai statues are much older than contemporarily thought, which is most commonly accepted to be around 700 years old. Evidence brought forth to suggest that the figures are much older has been oriented around the fact that the statues can be found embedded several meters underneath sediment. Naturally, as well as under normal conditions of erosion, this type of sedimentary burying would take much longer than only 700 years. Some archaeologists have also pointed out how the construction of the moai seemed to have ended abruptly and perhaps even dramatically. Many of the moai statues can be found scattered across the island, never having reached their destinations. Many of these statues even appear to have been abandoned halfway through their construction. However, upon further inspection of the island's history and the methods of construction and transportation of the moai, a much different story begins to unfold. To understand the current chaotic and almost post-apocalyptic state of Easter Island, we must examine how the ancient economy of the Rapua Nui people functioned, and the manner in which the moai were constructed. Legend states that the moai walked from their birthplaces to the edges of the island where they can be found today. For decades, anthropologists and archaeologists have mostly looked past this ancient tale. Until recently, that is. In 2013, researcher Carl P. Lipo constructed a large moai replica and attached a series of ropes to the head. 2 ropes extended outwards from each side of the replica, where several people tugged at the ropes in an alternating fashion. This symmetry of rhythm and tugging produced a wobble that subsequently moved the moai forward in what appeared to look like a sort of walking motion. Perhaps these clever researchers provided adequacy to the legends of the Rapua Nui. However, most evidence found across the island suggests that the statues were transported using tree trunks as rollers. Now, this is where the story seems to come full circle. Throughout the 300 years that the Rapua Nui were constructing the moai, an immense deforestation episode followed in their wake. The construction of the moai was a colossal undertaking, one that demanded large quantities of lumber for transportation. Given the small size of the island, it didn't take long before the entire island had been deforested. Along with land clearing for construction and cultivation, an invasive species of Polynesian rat was also introduced to the island at some point around the 14 to 1500s, causing massive famine and deprivation of resources. So the question still remains, how did the moai become buried under all that sediment? Well, as it turns out, deforestation was the culprit. Removing vast quantities of trees from the island subsequently kills the intricate root systems underneath the ground across the island. Root systems are an integral part of structure for unstable or uneven soil layers. Removing these structures sped up the process of erosion, creating more frequent landslides which, over a relatively short period of time, buried the Moai statues. Easter Island remains one of the most mysterious and eerie places on Earth. Yet, in understanding its history and cultural relevance, we achieve a grounding story of human ingenuity and error.